Hello, my name's Sue Klauber and I'm a time tunneler. Now, what do you think it would be like to find out that your uncle had been a secret agent in World War II? That's what happened to me. I'm going to talk about what he did in Special Operations Executive, known as SOE, which was crucial to helping Britain and its allies win World War II against the Nazis. So I started to find out about my Uncle George because there were rumours that he'd been an agent, and I ended up writing 2 books about him and his siblings called Zinc and Cobalt. I couldn't find out everything about him because some of it is still top secret, so I combined what I did know about him with what I researched and found out that agents did to come up with my novels. I can't be sure what he did because he died when I was a child, and also the government in World War II had made him sign something called the Official Secrets Act, in which he had to swear that he wouldn't tell anybody about being an SOE for the whole of his life. And can you imagine what that was like, keeping a secret for the whole of your life? Nowadays, we know that Britain and the Allies won, and it was all okay. But in 1940, when Prime Minister Churchill started SOE, the Nazis were winning. They were winning and winning and winning. They'd taken over every country in Europe. They did something, they called it the Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war, because they'd be very fast at invading a country and conquering it. And at the point when SOE was set up, they were on the coast of France, the nearest point to Britain, which was protected because it was an island, looking with binoculars over the sea, only 20 miles away from the coast of France to the coast of Britain, and the Nazis are working out how they can invade Britain as well. SOE had a number of training centres across Britain. They would be training agents to jump out of planes with parachutes into Nazi-controlled countries and live in disguise and sabotage the Nazis' plans. So the first part of the training was in the Highlands of Scotland, where they would learn armed and unarmed combat and physical fitness. And locals, people who lived there, who didn't know what was really going on, used to call it the monkey farm because they'd catch glimpses of training agents climbing up trees, swinging from trees on ropes, that kind of thing. Agents were actually learning how to make bombs and, most importantly, learning their cover stories, who they were going to be pretend to be when they were in disguise. And they had to not only speak the language of the country they were going to be parachuted into, they also had to know all the details of their pretend person's family, their school, their jobs, their brothers and sisters, everything, so that if they were interrogated by a Nazi Gestapo officer, they'd be able to keep to their cover story and not give anything away that they were really an agent. If somebody was going to go into France, they would have French cloth for their clothes, they would have French buttons, they would have French matches. I even heard of agents who had all their British tooth fillings taken out and replaced by the ones which the French used, so they would be completely convincing. And then they'd be tested as part of their training on their cover stories. They would be woken up at night and blindfolded and taken to a mock interrogation room where somebody would be dressed up as a Nazi Gestapo officer and would put them to the test. And the aim was to totally terrify the training agents so they'd be really ready. People who passed the commando training in the Highlands of Scotland received parachute training in Manchester and learnt Morse code, how to send messages back to Britain. Now, the average life expectancy after somebody had parachuted into Nazi-occupied France, for instance, was just 6 weeks. That's the same length as your school summer holiday. So it was the most dangerous work of the war. So what sort of things were they expected to do once they were in enemy territory? Their missions were called operations, and the aim was to spy on the Germans and sabotage their plans. So, for instance, they would bomb the railway lines which took Nazi soldiers from one place to another. They might bomb a factory which made the weapons and supplies that the Nazis needed. And they'd also help local resistance groups, which were groups of people in the countries that had been taken over who were trying to fight back against the Nazis from inside. About a quarter of the agents were women, and there were some very successful ones. For instance, Noor Inayat Khan was very brave. She lived in disguise in Paris for a long time with the job of working out what the Germans were doing and the resistance was doing and sending all those messages back to England. But unfortunately, she was betrayed and she was sent to a concentration camp and killed. Another very successful agent was Virginia Hall, who became an expert in organising resistance groups and supplying them with money and weapons and supplies, and she'd also look after other agents who might have been wounded or might be escaping. And she was considered by the Germans to be the most dangerous of the Allied, the English spies. She was disabled. She had a wooden leg that she called Cuthbert, and she managed to escape from the Nazis while being chased over the mountains in the snow and got herself back to Britain. So, what sort of person would make a good secret agent? It was only for the bravest people. They had to be a good actor, they had to be strong, they had to be able to think quickly, and they needed, of course, to speak the language of the country that they were living in. But the most important characteristic was to be forgettable, because if they all looked like James Bond, they'd stand out, and the Nazis would spot them in a crowd. So the most important quality was to just blend in and look like everybody else. In fact, it was very much like James Bond, and that they had all sorts of gadgets like toothbrushes, which had a secret compartment in the handle which could hold secret maps, or they would put bombs into dead rats and put them where they knew the Nazis were going to come. They had invisible inks, they had logs made out of plaster which they could put weapons in to carry around, and even a tiny gun which could be kept up a sleeve. Now, as Uncle George couldn't tell us anything about what he'd done, I had to follow the clues. My grandma, his mum, had a big wooden chest that she would put all the letters and passports and family photos into, and I found a photo of him getting a medal for parachuting, and then I looked on the internet and I found the actual medal that still exists. I eventually found out that Uncle George hurt his back when he was parachuting, so he couldn't go on any more operations, which probably saved his life. And instead, he became one of the team who organised operations for agents to go into countries in Eastern Europe. So, my writing challenge to you. Imagine you're an agent living in disguise in France. You could be in Paris or you could be in the countryside. It's up to you. Would you be like Noor or Virginia? Would you be like Harry Ree, for instance, who blew up a store of 5,000 tyres that the Nazis needed for their lorries and their tanks? And so what's your mission? How will you achieve it? And who can you trust? Most importantly, what's your cover story? Ben Cowburn, for instance, pretended to be a football manager visiting a new football stadium. So who are you? Who are your brothers and sisters, if you have them? Where did you go to school? What's your job? What jobs do your parents do? Think of as much detail as possible so that you can fool an interrogator who wants to catch you out. Hope you've enjoyed learning about SOE, and good luck.